Hello everyone! So if you have not seen my previous video about what this series Pathways is about, I will link it up here and in the description. This video is all about how I start a series like this. So I'm going to show you my sketching, my little color compositions, choosing colors, and so much more. If you have any questions at the end, just leave them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer either in the comments or in the next video. But I hope you enjoy watching the journey. Let's just jump in. First things first. From the very beginning, when I got the idea for this series, I knew I wanted to work with acrylics. Acrylics were my first love when I started painting in 2015, and over the years I have experimented with a lot of different painting mediums. Nowadays I tend to prefer watercolor and gouache for smaller works, plein air, studies, but I never forgot the feeling of freedom in using acrylics on a large canvas. And since my Pathways series will consist of large canvases, the smallest being 2 by 2 feet, I had this itch in the back of my mind that acrylics would be kind of perfect. A lot of you who have been following me for a while might be wondering why I wouldn't use oil paint for this series, because I do share a lot of my oil paintings here. Part of the reason is because I know that a lot of this work will need to be done indoors, and between my poor ventilation, limited space, and having 2 cats, oil paint presents quite a few challenges. The fact that I'll be working on several of the paintings at once makes oil paint a bit more difficult to navigate because I have so little space for the works in progress. So with that out of the way, let's talk about materials. Before now, I have always used Liquitex acrylics, mainly the Basics line, which were extremely affordable and plentiful when I lived in Denver. But now that I'm in Scotland, it's been a bit more challenging to get a hold of many of my old favorites. And in addition, I have been hearing so many wonderful things about other brands, particularly Golden, so I finally just went for it. I placed an order for some of these luxurious Golden heavy body acrylics. My acrylic-loving friends rave about these, so I felt pretty confident in purchasing them, but I still only wanted a small selection because I actually prefer to work with a limited palette. When I approach a large series of paintings, I like to have a color story to work within. And by that I mean I will do lots of swatches and playing and just see which colors I feel will really help me speak to the vision of my series. With Pathways, I'm going to be exploring some of the wildest, most rugged, and beautiful areas of the Scottish Highlands, so I really want my colors to help me bring the truth of the landscape alive, but also still allow me to tell my own story, put my own spin on it. Therefore, the colors I chose for my limited palette individually seem extremely intense and definitely not something you would see in nature. However, you'll soon see that with these colors, I'm able to create some of the most gorgeous, earthy, neutral, and moody mixes. And that is just perfect for my vision.
Keep my hand here on your back. on just like an evening dress. Break to the right, sway to the left.
All right, so these are the individual colors that I purchased with white mixed in on one end. So pure color all the way down to white. Then I wanted to test out the yellow. So the yellow mixed with each of those colors. Already with that very limited mixing, you can see there's quite a lot of variety that I can achieve. But these colors are very unnatural, very intense, something that I would only really use for like little pops of color here and there. So then we have the custom mixes. And you probably won't really understand my way of labeling these, but that's fine. But basically it's just to show that with these very select colors, I can achieve a lot of variation. Some of these really beautiful earthy tones. And if I mix a little bit of white in them, I'll get some really lovely lighter versions. And then if I mix a little black in or mix a variety of these together, like there's just so much possibility with very limited palettes. And I find that if you start with a base palette of these very, very intense colors, you can always mix more neutral, earthy versions. If I had started with something that was already leaning towards those neutrals, I wouldn't be able to do such a huge variety. So that's why I prefer to start with a limited palette that is a little bit more intense. And then of course you can always customize it. This page here will be my general guide, my color story for the series. Obviously I can mix way more colors than this, but I loved each of these for specific reasons. So for some of the more stormy scenes, I would probably lean towards these types of colors. And then for some of the more summery, happy scenes, I will choose from some of these colors. But of course, these will all probably make their way into the painting, into each painting at some point. I just love the idea that this helps harmonize my series. So obviously the individual paintings will stand on their own, but they'll be part of this color story.
Make your way back home. Put it on just like an evening dress. Break to the right, sway to the left. In the morning everything is back, and I make my way back home. Settle down, settle down, 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 down. Settle down for the night.
Now the work begins. Going into this series, I had quite a strong vision of several of the paintings based on the locations that really stand out in my memory. Because I'm exploring a single concept throughout this series, pathways, I knew I wanted the actual pathway leading through these various landscapes to be the focus, but not in every single painting. Sometimes I'm wandering off the path, or I have a vision of a painting that will sort of bridge the gap between a couple different other paintings. It's kind of fluid at this early stage, but to get all the ideas down on paper helps me sort of organize my thoughts. In the end, I'll probably be painting more canvases than will actually make it into the series, because I just know from experience that not every painting is going to be a success. But I gotta go through the steps anyway. I have to do the work. So to start off, I like to do lots of sketching, lots of color comps or color compositions, and it's sort of like storyboarding for a movie. Like sometimes I will actually do multiple angles of a specific scene just to explore the different forms and options for composition and colors and things like that. So this page in my sketchbook is a perfect example of exploring a bunch of the ideas I usually work very quickly with loose brushstrokes, a very painterly style, which, I mean, that is kind of my style anyway, but these sketches are particularly fast and very, very loose. So it's mainly just to get the ideas while they're flowing, and then this becomes my, not necessarily like a strict guide in the future, but I can always look back at this and it triggers that memory. It triggers that experience I had at that specific place, and it kind of guides me in the right direction. I will point out though that a lot of times the final canvas looks quite different to the color composition. These are sort of a beginning place, and then in the end I just go with my instincts and create the story I want to create on the canvas. But I do use these as an opportunity to explore a variety of compositions for a specific idea. And sometimes I get it right on the first try, and other times I have to do a lot of versions. Now this is just my own preference, but even though I'm going to be using acrylic on canvas for my final paintings, I do my smaller sketches and color studies with watercolor and gouache, mainly because I'm very comfortable with those mediums and I feel like I'm able to get my vision down on the paper more quickly and accurately. And because I'm doing so many different compositions and studies and ideas at this stage, I want to work quickly so that I don't forget any of those ideas. I find it so interesting how my brain can let things flow really, really quickly and easily with certain mediums, while others are a bit more of a struggle, or I just use them very differently. So of course I could do really tiny acrylic studies, but this is just the way that I like to work. So I may start some of these little studies with very loose washes of watercolor, but then I always work on top of them with gouache, which gouache is very similar to acrylic in a lot of ways. So the final look is something more like what I would achieve with acrylic. Usually this phase of the project, the sketches and the studies, is a few weeks of time, and I will also mix in some hiking trips and find some more inspiration in my surroundings as I need to. The other thing that I want to talk about is reference photos. So even though I have a lot of strong visions in my head of the things I want to paint, I still am constantly pulling up my references from those locations, or even not from that specific location that I'm painting. It could be something similar, or maybe my vision is of that location, but I want it to be a different type of lighting. So I'll bring up a bunch of my references that represent those things, and I can apply those effects to whatever scene I'm painting. It's definitely a skill that you develop over time to be able to take a vision in your head, use some loose guidance from a reference photo, but then turn it into the thing that you want to paint. So not necessarily copying specific references, but just using them as loose guides to help your ideas come to life. It's something that I started off doing very, very slowly. So I can even remember the first painting I tried doing this with. It was a Lord of the Rings scene, or a painting of Lothlorien, and I wanted to be loosely inspired by the movie version, but still do it in my own way. So I brought up some photos from the movie and I had those kind of sitting in the background, but instead of just staring at them and trying to copy everything I saw, I used the general colors and lighting that I saw, but tried to apply it to my own forms. And it was such a huge challenge. I can't even describe, so I know what it's like at first. There's so much going on in your mind while you're translating something you see in a reference, but applying it to your own forms and your own composition. It's like very mentally exhausting too, and you have to do it many, many, many times until it becomes more normal. But I highly recommend that if you do plan on painting your own landscapes in the future, that you start this practice as soon as you can. It will become such a valuable skill that will take you so far in your artwork. And like I said, I started off struggling to do that, but slowly over the years, it became very, very normal, and now that's all I do. While I'm working on all of these small compositions and studies, I'm often thinking about a variety of ways I can represent my concept, maybe in a more unusual way, or like something that isn't so obvious, like a pathway through a forest or a landscape. That's quite obvious. And I don't mind that necessarily. It's just that I sometimes want to make the viewer think a little bit more. And one way that I can do that is to jot down a ton of ideas that just come to my mind of what could represent a pathway. So if you saw my recent art haul video, you will know that I now am the owner of some very interesting materials known as acrylic markers. And that is something I'm very excited about for this particular series. I am going to be taking them on a couple different road trips along with some canvases and either doing some of the studies outside, or if I can manage it, I might even try to do one of the larger paintings outside. I haven't done that in a long time. The last time I did that, it was kind of a disaster. But, I've grown a lot since then. So, yeah, I might give it a try. But the reason I love the idea of acrylic markers is because they're very portable, very, very easy to use, and I love drawing. So using acrylic markers feels like a mix between drawing and painting. And in fact, in the next video, I'm going to show you how I've been using the acrylic markers in this series already in the studio. So for the rest of this video, I'll throw on some music and let you watch this little painting come to life. And again, if you have any questions about what I've talked about today or about the whole process, don't hesitate to let me know. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up because that really helps my channel. All right, I hope you are all doing well, and I will see you again soon. Take care.